It's game week. The first depth chart of the year is here. And, it's just an exciting time to be a Husky fan. So where better to listen to all of that than Locked On Huskies?
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to another edition of Locked On Huskies. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. We write for Inside the Huskies with Fan Nation and Sports Illustrated. You can check out all our work at si.com/college/Washington. It's officially game week. I'm really excited to be able to finally break down the first depth chart of the year. I used to think people that would just spend a half hour on the depth chart were legitimate sickos. And now, Lars, you and I can both officially say that we are those sickos. And I think it's a lot of fun to be able to do that. I have to remind everybody that this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. All right, Lars, let's be sickos here for a minute. This is great. I'm just excited to talk about real football. So I'm just going to have this annoyingly giddy attitude all week because I love talking about football. So the first thing that we kind of have to dive into here is it wasn't necessarily a surprise. I know we talked about it on yesterday's show. So all you everydayers out there need to make sure you listen to our Monday show because we did say that there was a good chance that this was going to happen. Parker Brailsford is officially the winner of the right guard job. And, technically we can say he is the only guy who won a spot at guard. And that goes into some comments that Ryan Grubb had in his press conference earlier today.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it was kind of one of those where we always thought Parker was going to be a guy. It was just, could he catch up in time and could he kind of get his body right? Not get his body right, but get a little more size added to him, because that was one thing that he talked about early in fall camp was he wanted to put on, I think, 10 to 15 pounds from where he was currently at. And we're like, I'm not sure if you can put on that much weight in 2 weeks, but we'll see. And it actually sounds like he has. I'm not sure if he's truly up to 285 yet, but it sounds like they definitely are comfortable with where he's at to be able to put him out as a starting offensive lineman.
No, absolutely. And one of the things that Ryan Grubb said was it doesn't matter that he's undersized. He just moves people. That's his biggest thing. He is a people mover. And if you ever just watch him, you say, yeah, that dude is as strong as anybody out there on the field. And, we talked about it yesterday. It's one of our favorite things, just having an oar in the depth chart. There are 2 oars on the offensive side. One is at tight end, which is not necessarily surprising. That was something that, we kind of saw coming. The other one is at left guard, and it's Nate Kalepo or Julius Buelow. And I think we both kind of agree that we think that Nate Kalepo is going to be the starter by the time Saturday rolls around. But it's something where it's just kind of impressive to see a redshirt freshman in that position. And it's something that I know we'll dive into a little bit more here as the show moves along. But Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb both said it, that it doesn't really matter what year these guys are. If they can play, they can play.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the other thing about Parker is, unlike a few other examples, Roger Rosengard last year players like that, he is a true second-year player. He is a true redshirt freshman. Now, he doesn't have a COVID year. He hasn't been in the program for 3 years, and he's just listed as a redshirt freshman. He really does look like he's been in the program for a while, though. Not physically, but just it almost seems like he's been here for 3 or 4 years. It just kind of seems like he's always been around the program. And now he's a plug-and-play guy. And I think also last year when he did get his opportunities a little bit on special teams and kind of just learning from those guys last year, I think that did also help him a lot this year. And one thing that also is important to remember about Parker, he's not a guard. He's a center. He came in as a center. He has the ability to play both left and right guard, which I think actually is going to help him down the road when he gets kicked back over to center, because having that, and that's one thing I actually talked about with him when we got to talk to him in fall camp, was, well, I played both guard positions and center, so it's good having that understanding of, okay, what is the guy to my left and right doing, especially when you're a first-year starter.
No, that's a great point, and it's something where he also can play tackle. He's not going to, but it's something that he's discussed. We've seen him doing some work just out of tackle positions and everything, where if they wanted him to play right or left tackle, I'm sure he could, but it's just great just to talk about the versatility that he brings to this offensive line. And it's something where, Landon Hatchett has found himself into the depth chart where he's not the backup center. as Ryan Grubb did say, where if there were an injury that would happen to Mateo Mele, that Parker would move over from guard to center, and it would probably be Garen Hatchett that would slide in at guard, or Julius Buelow or whoever. But it's something where just the youth and just having somebody like that on the line where you know that this guy can be just kind of a stalwart for a couple of years is something that's really exciting to think about for just the future of this program, as you kind of, and I do this a lot, I know, where you don't really want to look beyond 2023 because there's a lot to be excited about this year. But there's also the sense of the coaches have to do it at a certain point where they have to just kind of say, yeah, what about 2024? What about 2025? Oh, Parker Brailsford is a guy that we know we can rely on for at least another couple of years. Yeah, we gotta give this guy a shot. If just at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it was the same conversation that I had with Eric Schmidt about Garen Hatchett last year, where he was playing so much on special teams because they didn't have a ton of room for him along the offensive line. But it's still a matter of getting these guys game reps and getting them experience because hey, 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we kind of want we don't want to have to be replacing him every single year with a different guy and teaching a new guy a new position. So that's why even though they're not starting last year and this year, you want those guys to be ready and have the knowledge where all you have to do is just put them in and see how they react on Saturdays.
Right. And I know we'll get to this a little bit on the other side of the ball too, but were there any real surprises on the offensive side of just as this depth chart came out?
Not necessarily. I mean, the only one that was, again, a little surprising was Tristan Dunn being listed on the 2 deep. But again, when I asked Chuck Morrell about that same thing with what Ryan Grubb said, just because they're on the depth chart doesn't necessarily mean they are going to be the first guy off the bench when the starters aren't playing. But I think it is kind of a testament to how they see certain guys. So I think the fact that Tristan's sliding in a little more Husky and staying away from safety, I think is intriguing, but it's not necessarily a surprise.
Right. And, it's kind of, as we kind of circle back to the offensive side, it's something where Tayshawn Lyons is somebody that you asked Grubb about specifically, where he said, yeah, he's probably not going to get on the field a whole ton at first. Yes, he's in the depth chart, but that he said that kind of speaks more to the injury that Giles Jackson sustained and how long he might be out more than it does to where Tayshawn is at this point. And he wasn't knocking Tayshawn in any way, but that's a true freshman in, as we've said, arguably the deepest receiver room in the country. So it's just kind of, yeah, we're going to have Denzel Boston move around a little bit more. We'll have Jalen Polk, Jeremy Bernard, do all these different things kind of before we get to the point where we want to put Tayshawn Lyons on the field.
And I think both the coaches, DeBoer and Grubb, mentioned, and even Morrell has acknowledged it for the defensive side, the guys are going to get a chance on special teams before they're likely going to get a chance on offense or defense. And I mean, going back to not harping on it, but Gary Natchez last year was playing on special teams, not so much on the offensive side of the ball. Now this year, he's probably going to be a little more of a constant staple on the offensive side. So I think to your point earlier, that's how the coaches are projecting down the line is, okay, well, who can we count on special teams? And then we'll go from there, because you have to be, if you can't play on special teams, unless you're a quarterback, it's going to be kind of hard to justify getting on the field any other way.
Right. And so last thing as we start to wrap up here, we talked about the Nate Kalepo and Julius Buelow, or the other one is Devin Culp and Jack Westover. If you can only pick one of those two guys to start this Saturday, who do you think it is?
Jack Westover.
Why?
I mean, just because his versatility allows more, especially that's kind of what Grubb's offense is built around, is having guys do a number of different things. That's not to say that Devin Culp can't do those things, but I think especially when we get back to the consistency thing, I mean, DeBoer literally said, my favorite word is consistency. And it's like,
yep,
that's what I think of Jack Westover, whether it's hurdling guys, blocking guys, lining up as an H-back, splitting out. He showed last year he can do it all. And he's also one of the more reliable pass catchers on the offense. So I think just from a all-around standpoint, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Westover.
You took the Tayshawn Lyons question like just straight out of my mouth when you asked Grubb, because I was in the process of doing that when you spoke up, and that's everything that I would have said about Jack Westover. So I appreciate you doing that. And now I have to remind the good people out there that this show is sponsored by Betterhelp. Sometimes in life we're faced with tough choices, and the path forward isn't always clear. I've had some times in my life where I didn't know what I was going to do with my career, and therapy was something that was really helpful for me as I tried to steer myself towards a decision. Therapy is really, really beneficial for so many reasons. It's helped me with career choices, with, moving across the country. There are a lot of times in my life where I found therapy to be very, very helpful. And, if you're thinking of starting therapy, I'd recommend giving BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online. It's designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you're able to switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. you have to visit betterhelp.com/lockedoncollege to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedoncollege. Okay. Now we're going to move over to the defensive side of the ball. And I know what the graphic says. It says any surprises on defense. Were there any? No, not really. There are a couple things where it's, okay, this, I see why they did this. I see why they did that. But the biggest thing that we need to talk about, and we're going to have to continue to talk about through all of this, is Zach Durfee, who there was no update given to Kalen DeBoer by the NCAA. So his status is still up in the air. As you're listening to this on Tuesday, the game is officially 4 days away, the first game of the season.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that how many games Zach is eligible or ineligible for, it's not going to be for Saturday. I think it is a little weak on the NCAA's part to let this drag out as long as it has, because in previous situations, sometimes schools didn't get all the necessary paperwork in, and that's not been the case with Washington. Washington's made it clear since early to mid-August that, hey, we've done literally everything possible that we can do to get this situation finals one way or another, whether not just to get it approved, but just to get some resolution. And the fact that there's no resolution, part of me thinks that that's a good sign that maybe that there won't be a full season of ineligibility. But at the same point, it is the NCAA, and they are not exactly the most upstanding organization. So it wouldn't necessarily be surprising to just have them say on Friday afternoon, oh yeah, by the way, Zach's ineligible for the entire year.
I think they just suspended you for the entire season just for that comment, because they definitely heard that.
I mean, I'm not sure if they have any oversight, though.
You never know. You never know. So one thing that I think we need to just kind of talk about, let's start on the back end and then work our way up to the defensive line. In the secondary, there weren't any real major surprises in terms of the depth chart. We talked about who was going to take the backup corner spots, and it did end up being Thaddeus Dixon and Devon Banks. At safety, again, no real surprises in McEllisteen and Cameron Fabiculanen, where there were times that during the 22 season where Cam Fab's play at Husky especially wasn't necessarily great, and I think that Chuck Morrell had very high praise for him, said he really trusts him a lot at safety. I think that's something where maybe he'll be a little bit better there. He's going to move around a lot, is another thing that he touched on today. But I think that it's just kind of getting some seniority back there, because there's either him or Vince Nunley, and I kind of understand the seniority play of going with Cam Fab in that spot.
Yeah, I think it's more of a testament to Cam Fab easily could have decided to transfer at any point in the last 2 years, and nobody would have blamed him. I think that's fair to say, especially coming in as a 4-star and never really establishing himself as a starter. It would be understandable if he wanted to go somewhere else and maybe reinvent himself. And I think it's actually that kind of did a part to win the coaching staff, not over per se. I think that did help a little bit of his cause to say, hey, look, I'm going to continue fighting for this, and you guys are going to have to find a reason to keep me off the field. I don't think he looked the greatest in fall camp. I think we can both agree on that. But again, that's one thing to kind of contextualize fall camp, where the offensive line also didn't look that great for decent chunks of fall camp, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the offensive line is going to be bad this year. They're just going against one of the better defensive lines in the country, and similar with the receivers. You have one of the deepest talented receiver rooms in the country going against an improved secondary, but I think obviously you're taking the receiver room over the secondary every day and twice on Sundays.
Oh, that's a great point. I just got to remind everybody real fast that college football season is here, and this season, Locked On is kicking up our coverage. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On College YouTube channel. So you don't have to change the channel from Locked On Huskies to get anything different. Locked On College Football Live will cover the college football playoff implications, conference rivalry games, and go in depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our gigantic stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. All right, let's talk about the linebackers here a little bit, because it's something that one of the things that Chuck Morrell talked about today that I was really intrigued by was when he said that, just something that I'm writing about, you can go check it out on Inside the Huskies as well, is that they're going to have to face a lot of running quarterbacks this year. And that's something we knew. And the terms that he used were just, this is the most important thing. That's our highest level of concern, was the exact quote. And it's something where they're going to have a great matchup against Taylor Green in week 1 with Boise State, who's a really good runner. And it's something where this all starts with Edifon Ulofoshio. And if he is healthy for the entire season, he's athletic enough, he's talented enough, he's smart enough in the defense to, I think really is a guy that you can just kind of leave him out there as a quarterback spy and then just still run your defense with everybody else around him.
I completely agree. And actually, as you were saying that, because we both agree that the defense runs through Eddie, but the one thing that's different this year that was not the case last year is Mish Powell and nickel at the Husky position. And I think when you think of a running quarterback, obviously we're going to talk about the edges here in a bit, but stopping either both running backs and quarterbacks from getting to that second and third level, that wasn't something Washington could do last year. There was a lot of times where, whether it was Dom or no matter who really it was just getting run over. And Mish was always solid in run protection. So I think that is kind of going to be not the key, but it's almost going to be like that, like dark horse, as it were, where like obviously you're going to expect Eddie and Braylon Trice off the edge to kind of be the first two guys to stop running quarterbacks. But I would say don't sleep on Mish Power, because obviously, yes, you want him better in coverage, but his run defense last year was one of, if not the best on the team.
So I'm really glad you brought that up, because one thing that I harped on a lot last fall as the defense started to struggle a little bit is when Dom Hampton was still playing Husky. One thing that we saw them do a lot in fall camp last year, we haven't seen it nearly as much this year, was they would run a nickel blitz and they would bring Dom and pressure the quarterback. And usually they would have him come from the blind side. And it's something where multiple times it forced bad throws, it forced interceptions. And that's something we didn't really see it all over the course of the season. And it's something where if it's giving your quarterback so much trouble in practice, why don't you run it a little more? And maybe it was something where, we'd rather use Dom in this role or rather use him here. But I think Mish, to your point, talking about how great of a run defender he is somebody who can just rush the passer a little bit at times and just create some pressure and force him to maybe step up into a Braylon Trice or a Javon Parker or just somebody along the defensive line for a sack.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he also, because he's got the size to do it. I think, when you look at other nickel / Husk, quote unquote, Husky cornerbacks in the past, where it was Elijah Mold and a few of the smaller guys, Misha's got that ability to deliver a hit and also still agile enough to drop back in coverage to where he wouldn't get beat. I just think I don't want to knock Dom on this one, but I think of the two, Mish is slightly a better athlete. I think that it's not a stretch to say that. What I'd be curious is, has that, we talk about a lot of gaps here, has that gap closed? Because Dom at safety is really now going to be one of the last lines of defense, also still coming up as another run supporter as well. And I think goes back to the point, both of them are now in a better position to where they can affect the run game and the pass game better where they are this year compared to last year.
I like that. Moving on to the defensive line, there weren't really any surprises. The first string is pretty obvious. It's Braylon Trice. It's Tuli Gasanoa, it's MJ Ale, and it's Zion Tupuola-Fatui. And then behind him, it's Sakai Salafoa, it's Jacob Bandis, it's Fatui Tuitele, and it's Voight Tanufi. No surprises there, but so right now we can't really talk about Zach Durfee. The first guy it's something we're gonna talk about the next segment as well. The first guy at edge and the first guy at tackle who are not listed on the depth chart right now that are going to make a push for those spots.
Ooh, that's a good. So that are not on the depth chart
right now. Yeah.
So, how do I say this correctly? It's going to be one of the Parker brothers, because last time we were seeing him in fall camp, I think we talked to one of them, but then there might have been some questions after the fact. So I don't want to get in hot water here, but I think I'm going to say one of the Parkers, and part of me wants to say Maurice Himes because I know who you're going to say.
Yep.
But so I'm going to leave that one to you because that I'm just going to give you that one right there.
Thank you.
I do remember talking with Maurice, in fall camp but both on after practice and just generically. He does seem like a guy who he's still got a little bit more ways to go, but I think he could be turning a corner here, and especially in the first couple of weeks when, especially you're playing a running quarterback, who do you want harassing a guy? Right. One of your better athletic freaks, and that's not Braylon Trice. That's Maurice Himes. Again, kind of not similar bodies, but they do kind of play that attacking style. And so, I'm not saying that they're anywhere near close to each other, but I think Braylon is what Maurice wants to become.
Right. No, that is a great point. And yes, I am going to go with Lance Holtzclaw here because he is just also a really, really talented athlete. And it's something that Maurice Himes has talked about. And Zion Tupuola-Fatui told me the other day, just how amazing of a pass rusher he is and how everyone has been really, really happy with his production. And then on the interior, yes, you do kind of have to pick a Parker brother. And I'm going to go with Javon just because he was a little bit more productive last year, obviously because he played. But it's something where he's just, I feel like he's impressed me a little bit more throughout fall camp than Armand has, but I think that Armand just has unlimited potential as both a run defender and a pass defender. All right, now I got to remind everybody at home about FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. That's a great deal. I might have to take advantage of that. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use. You can be on everything from spreads to player props and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. FanDuel is an official partner of the NFL. Moving on here, it's time to just talk about movers because, yeah, we just talked about mainly along the defensive line of who's going to just move up the depth chart, who's going to move down, because that's something we can talk about as well, is who might fall by the wayside. It always sucks to talk about, but that's something that is going to happen. So let's start on the offensive side here. Who do you think are going to be the biggest movers just up or down on the offensive side of the ball this year?
I got one that I just thought of. Perfect timing for this. Josh Quavis.
Oh, good one.
Because here's the thing, as I'm thinking more about this, it's like obviously, yes, Jack Westover and Devin Culp are the two unquestioned leaders and the veterans in the room and whatever. But the reason why they brought Dylan Johnson in at running back is almost similar to why they brought Josh Quavis in at tight end. They're versatile guys who can do a number of things and have already played. Not again, Quavis played at Cal Poly, so not the same level as Dylan Johnson. But I think his impact, and especially when teams start to, not a blanket, but again, there's going to be some defenses that Rome's going to get taken away, maybe for a half or a quarter. Jalen, either one of the Jalen's, Polk or McMillan, is going to get taken away. So the tight end is going to become that much more vital. And so I think Quavis, by the end of the year, I think I said this on one of the other shows this week, or last week, where he might lead the team in receptions at tight end when all is said and done, even though he's not even on the depth chart as we're looking into week one.
I feel bad because I know I pumped him up throughout fall camp, and that one just totally slipped my mind. So I appreciate you bringing that one up because the first name that came to my mind was Tybo Rogers. And obviously it's been a very tumultuous fall for Tybo. Got suspended. He hasn't practiced for a while. Ryan Grubb told us last week that he hurt the team with his suspension. And then today, Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb did a lot of talking up of Tybo Rogers. So they're clearly very, very happy with what they have in him. They're very excited about his potential, but he, as Kalen DeBoer said, he's got a ways to go. He's got ground that he has to make up from all the time that he's missed. So it's something where they seem very happy. And the question was posed to both Grubb and DeBoer of who are guys that might burn their red shirt. And the two answers that Grubb gave two answers. Kalen gave one. Grubb's two answers were Tybo Rogers and Landon Hatchett. And Kalen's answer was Tybo Rogers. So maybe that's, a little bit more special team stuff where he's going to be a kick returner. But, maybe he gets into a couple of games and maybe he just continues to impress the coaching staff over the course of camp not camp, just practices over the season at this point. Again, I'm the one who's been so excited to talk about games and then I call it camp. That's on me. That's my bad.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing too to consider when we're looking at the depth chart, and we mentioned this early on in the show, where the receiver room is so stacked, similar to the running back room. Even with Cam Davis being out, you got to find a way to get Jeremy Bernard and Daniel Ngata the ball. So both of them are on kickoff return. Jalen McMillan's the punt returner, so that's another way to get him the ball. There's just you're trying to find ways to get your best athletes involved on Saturdays, and I think to the coaching staff's credit, they found ways to do that last year, and I think they're going to do it even more so this year. I just don't know necessarily. I wonder because if Tybo emerges, that means somebody else fell off. At least one other guy fell off. That means Richard Newton or Sam Adams didn't get as much playing time as we think they might. I mean, not that they're going to get a ton, but in fall camp, obviously they were ahead of Tybo for a little portion of camp. And then because if he's able to do that, then that opens up the door. And again, it also goes back to it starts on special teams. If Tybo can make an impact either as a returner or even as a gunner, there's plenty of ways the guys can make an impact. I'm not necessarily intrigued with him as a gunner, but again, if you can do it, you can do it. So I think as long as he shows that he's able to step up and kind of learn his lesson, for lack of a better phrase.
Sure.
I think the coaching staff, I think that's the thing, is they see the talent, but this coaching staff has proven just because you got talent doesn't mean you're going to play it.
No, that is a very good point. I like that a lot. And, when we kind of discuss who might move down if Tybo does move up, I think that it's kind of a bummer to talk about, but the answer is Richard Newton, in my opinion. Because, yeah, he's really improved in every area of his game, but he just is a guy, when you look at all the other backs in the room versus what they have in him, he's the one who just kind of stands out as, he doesn't necessarily fit the scheme perfectly in terms of what Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer want to do on the offensive side of the ball. He's way more of that downhill kind of back, and he's fit really well at times. Like they won the Cal game last year because of him. But it's something where, especially with him being a senior, if Tybo continues to flash as a freshman, why not play the guy who's going to be here for a while? That just kind of seems like the answer, just at least when it comes to the running back room, in my opinion.
I mean, you got to remember, Richard Newton is the wild dick in the room. So, I just had to get that in there. For context and reference, that was a nickname that he earned as a Wildcat quarterback in the Chris Peterson era that is carried over into the Kalen Moore. Just needed to clear that up for context. And I just needed to kind of add something on the back end of that. But yeah, I mean, I kind of agree that, it is unfortunate. And I think that was also something that Grubb mentioned later on in fall camp, where he said that, if guys have been hurt, how much can you really rely on them? Even if they're healthy now, it's like, well, what happens if you put him in for a series or two and then he gets hurt? It's like, why didn't we just give it to the other guy? Why didn't we give it to Tybo? Why didn't we give it to Sam? And also, even though Newton is able to run the Wildcat, if that's the best, right? Is it the best you can do? And we've seen it even in fall camp. They've got a few other guys that can do it.
Yeah.
So what he kind of cornered that market when he was younger at Washington and Chris Peterson and Jimmy Lake. He's kind of lost it now. He never really gained it back. I mean, it's a testament to him for staying around, but it's just unfortunate. I just don't see him getting many snaps this year.
Now let's jump over to the defensive side here, because I have a name that's just sticking out at the top of my mind, who I don't necessarily think that this person should burn their red shirt this year. So I feel like some people might see where I'm going with this, but if there was one guy on the defense side of the ball that I would say is going to be a big mover up the depth chart, for me, it's Vincent Holmes. I think that Vincent Holmes is really talented. He's just got really, really impressive speed, but I don't think his body is ready for just any kind of workload at the college level just yet. He's a really slight guy. He's a lot lighter. And I think that it's going to take a little bit of time for his speed and just his play style to translate to the college level in terms of because he needs to add weight. And as he does that, maybe he'll do that over the course of the season. And if he gains 5-10 pounds over the year and the coaching staff is comfortable playing him, I think we see him in a game or two this year at some point, whether it be on special teams or he does get in there at the end of a blowout or two at the safety position, because he's just a guy that I'm really excited about all around for what he could be just moving forward. And I think that the coaching staff might want to see what they have in him this year.
I completely agree. The only thing that I think would hinder that would be, can McAllister improve enough to where maybe he takes more of those snaps and then Vince kind of has to stay with special teams and maybe take a little less number. I mean, in an ideal world, that's what you want. But if Holmes is able to beat Esteen out, they're going to give it to him. So that is an intriguing battle that I'll be willing to watch.
What about you? Anywhere you want to go? I know we talked about the defensive line, really.
Yeah, see, that's kind of the thing. The more you think about the defensive line after the Parkers, I mean, MJ Ulamale has pretty much cemented himself. I think Bandis has done a good job. So that's kind of, they don't necessarily have a need to. I think the biggest mover might actually be Sakai.
Okay,
because we know what Zion can do. If Zion can't replicate his 2020 self and truly get back to being that dominant edge rusher, I almost wonder how much will Sakai's ability to just be that run stuffer and set the edge supplant Zion. I'm not rooting for it, and I'm not rooting against it either way. But I'm just saying, I think that's actually something that the more that the season goes on, that's going to be a battle, I think, than we're looking at right now.
I couldn't agree more. That I honestly didn't even think about that one. So I appreciate you bringing that up. Lars, as always, I want to thank you for being here with me. All you everydayers out there, I want to remind you to subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts or watch podcasts, we are there. So go find it, listen to it, leave us a 5-star rating, leave us some comments. We're going to do a mailbag at some point this week, probably just for a couple minutes. So we'll probably end up going rapid fire just to answer as many questions as we can in the span of a couple minutes. And it's game week. So be sure you stay tuned to Locked On Huskies, Locked On Pac-12, wherever you get your Husky information from. We prefer it's Locked On Huskies. We also prefer it's Inside the Huskies, which you can find at si.com/college/Washington. Make sure to subscribe to everything that we do. There's going to be a whole lot more great content coming through the rest of the week. Stay tuned.